This is my second video. This is one I'm not going in alphabetical order. I'm not going in and I'm not going into order one would normally think. We're doing it more for what is the most timely and or I have the most information on, and this is going to be about the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns, who has an incredible fan base as far as very loyal fans, who I question their ability to understand football sometimes, because it's amazing how rabid they can be, and yet they will cut off their nose to spite their face in a heartbeat. And I'm just baffled by that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard Cleveland Brown fans say, we're going to have a fantastic year. Next year's going to be a great year. And I've told them, no, you're not going to make the playoffs. It's not going to happen. You're not going to have a good team. But so let me tell you right now, no, you're not going to make the playoffs. It's not going to happen. You had a good team and you messed it up. When I say you, it's not the fans' fault. This lies at the foot of the general manager and the owner and whoever else made these decisions. But I'm going to start at the very beginning of my relationship with the Cleveland Browns, tenuous though it may be. We'll go back to when Art Modell owned the team, and the team that's now the Baltimore Ravens was owned here in Cleveland by Art Modell. Everything that I learned from Art Modell firsthand was that despite the fact he owned the Cleveland Browns from inception, he had no clue about football. Just no clue. I mean, the man just doesn't understand football, which is probably why he fired Paul Brown, because he didn't understand football, and why Paul Brown went and created the Cincinnati Bengals. And why the Bengals have been to the Super Bowl and the Browns never have, even though they're a newer team. Art Modell's vision was just making money, turn the Browns to a powerhouse, but ultimately it was about making money. And he always listened to football experts such as other people who had been in football for so long and made money at it and supposedly were successful. Let me assure you, those are normally the worst people to talk to about who to hire and who not to hire. They're not particularly good at it, and I'll prove that in various other videos. But he also listened to fans. Always a bad move. He listened to sports writers. Sports writers are normally terrible they don't know anything about sports either. They see what they see and they report what they see, but the lack of depth of sports writers is amazing. Their inability to understand the nuance of certain games or understand a good player from a bad player or so on, or even why a team wins or loses. This is why Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless, when they were together, it was hauntingly ridiculous. And I'm shocked that they got the views that they got. It's almost like a comedy show of ineptitude. And it wasn't until Skip Bayless left and I'm going, why would you pay that idiot so much money to actually hear his opinions? But and Max Kellerman came in. Max Kellerman knows football. Max Kellerman knows most sports. Max Kellerman's very, very smart. Stephen A. Smith, not so much. Skip Bayless, terrible. Shannon Sharp, phenomenal. He should have his own show. Get rid of Skip Bayless, bring in somebody who knows football. Shannon Sharp, brilliant. Let's go back to the Cleveland Browns. Art Modell did not know anything about football. It was very obvious. When I became aware of the Cleveland Browns or picked them as a pet project, one of my pet projects, they had a string of success because of a gentleman named Marty Schottenheimer. Marty Schottenheimer was an incredible coach who had some basic philosophies. He wasn't going to outwit you with this incredible, he wasn't going to create new dimensions to an offense that was going to rattle everybody's cage. What he believed in was, if you just do the fundamentals and you do the fundamentals well and you do them better than the other team, you'll win games. And he was right. That is ultimately accurate. But that'll get you to playoffs, but it won't get you wins in Super Bowls ordinarily. and a matter of fact, it never got him to the Super Bowl, unfortunately. His when I tried to get involved, I saw the Cleveland Browns were an old team. That Marty Schottenheimer was getting every single ounce of talent out of them, way past their prime. Art Modell said he's upset that Marty Schottenheimer can't actually get to the Super Bowl. So even after a very, very successful season, he fires him, brings in a new head coach. Eventually, that head coach obviously has to get rid of the old people. He gets rid of very, very popular players with the fans, and so on. But that coach knew what he was doing. It's just he didn't care about the fans, and he didn't care about. He just wanted to win, and he knew the Browns, of the way they were created at that point, weren't going to win the championship, and they were too old and they just weren't capable of winning. So. But eventually, Art Modell listened to the fans, and he decided that head coach had to go. He just wasn't going to be. He just wasn't a good head coach. So he fired Bill Belichick, and we'll just say last laugh, right? But I sat there, remember arguing with people saying, "No, Bill Belichick, he's doing a good job. He may be stepping on people's toes. He may not know exactly how to shut you guys up from whining, but I'm telling you, he knows he needs more talent at certain positions, and he knows he needs to get younger." And they said, "Well, he brought in Vinny Testaverde. That's not getting younger." And I go, "But it was an upgrade in talent, wasn't it?" And but I digress. The Browns. Art Modell takes the Browns away, and well, no. Let me cover a few more things. So Bill Belichick, Marty Schottenheimer, was one game away from the Super Bowl. I watched this game in Cleveland. It was in Denver, and the fan favorite Bernie Kosar could not complete a pass if his life depended on it. The wide receivers they were running routes that weren't right. Nothing was going right for the Cleveland Browns. Denver was stomping all over them. And one man took the entire team and put them on his back and said, "Give me the ball and I will help this team win." And that man accounted for 256, I believe, 256 all-purpose yards in that game. Think about it. One man, 256 all-purpose yards in one game. It was almost like his one man against the team. And he brought the Cleveland Browns all the way back to the precipice of going to their first Super Bowl. And this man carrying the ball across the finish line, he's about to score a touchdown, would have put the Browns ahead by at least 4 points, I believe, with the closing minutes happening, and the momentum definitely on the Browns' favor. And a linebacker punches the ball out of his hand at the last minute to stop the game-winning score. So, do the Cleveland Cleveland fans, did they support this guy? Did they reward him? No, they said he lost the game for him. You guys weren't in that game. That was his game. He put your team on his back and he drug them. Ernest Biner should actually have had a statue erected in his name after that game saying, "Look, this man almost took us to the Super Bowl. He did more than all the other guys combined when it came to production. And you guys spit on him because he fumbled at the last minute. But you wouldn't have even been close. He didn't lose you the game. He had no support. And at the end, he didn't win the game single-handedly. Boo-hoo. He didn't win it single-handedly. There's nobody could win that game single-handedly ordinarily. The man did a phenomenal job. And I was so disgusted with Cleveland Brown fans with the way they turned on him. And Art Modell traded him for Mike Oliphant, I believe, who, needless to say, you don't hear about Mike Oliphant. But the people who got Ernest Biner, they were very happy when Ernest Biner helped them win 2 Super Bowls later on, at least one, I think 2 though. And I was proud. I was happy for Ernest Biner too, because he finally got the recognition he deserved. Because, again, so Browns fans, before you sit there and say you're the smartest fans, or before you pat yourselves on the back and say how bright you are, just know this: the reason why you're not in the Super Bowl, one of those reasons is because Ernest Biner, the way you treated him, God Himself cursed you and said you'll never go to the Super Bowl until you beg for Ernest Biner's forgiveness. Somewhere along the lines, somebody said, Ernest Biner, they still pick on him to this day. Ernest Biner didn't lose you the game. You guys didn't show up, and he's the only man who showed up. And then they all followed him, and then they rode his back. And you rode his back to the point that, unfortunately, a mistake happened at the end. But, 256 yards, come on. That doesn't happen every day, and definitely not in a playoff game. All right, so back to, this is why they call the Cleveland franchise the Factory of Tears. That's your nickname, guys. You got to suck it up, and I'm going to explain why it's going to continue. So, if you're a Browns fan and you don't want to know the truth, turn this video off. If you like to pick on the Browns, keep it up. You're going to get a lot of material. If you're a Browns fan who wants to do better, who wants to learn more, keep listening. You're going to be shocked. So, from a very young age, I would send out letters and so on to the general managers, and I tracked them. General managers, I watched them as much as I did the players, because as far as general managers go, so do the players. In other words, if you're a good general manager, you'll put good players on your team, and you'll figure it out so coaches can actually win. Do you know how you see a good coach, a good head coach in the NFL? You look to their quarterback. If they got a good quarterback, then they're a good head coach. If they got a bad quarterback, they're probably a bad head coach. The correlation is, if you have a good quarterback, you're probably going to more likely win games if you're a good coach. If you're a good coach with a bad quarterback, you're probably going to lose games, so you're not going to be seen as a good coach. Understand that? The general manager is the one that actually gets the quarterback on that team. So it's all about the players and the coaching. And if you have great players but not great coaching, you're going to lose. If you have terrible players and great coaching, you're going to lose. If you have great coaching and bad players, you're still probably going to lose, unless you're Don Shula, Bill Belichick, or Mike Tomlin. That's about the only 3 coaches I can tell you that with inadequate players, they can still find ways to beat you. I think historically, those are the only 3 I can think of right off the top of my head. Al Davis and Tom Landry will probably have an honorable mention. So what I will do is I started getting phone numbers for general managers and calling them up and talking to them if I could. And back then, people would talk to you on the phone because they didn't know who I was. They didn't know, am I a reporter? Am I a scout? Am I somebody from another team? Who am I? And back then, they didn't ask. So it was easier for me to be able to talk to these general managers. I've talked to Bill Walton. Bill Walton. I've talked to Charlie Emery. I've talked to John Shaw, kind of. John Shaw was the general manager for the Rams. And there's not much talking to John Shaw. Right when he didn't know who I was, he just hung up on me. John Shaw was probably one of the more interesting of the people I tried to talk to. But I contacted the Browns when the Browns left for Baltimore, and they came back, had the whole new Browns. Art Modell's not there. Now I get another shot at actually creating a team from the scratch. So I wrote copious notes. I looked at all the players that were available to the Cleveland Browns over the next 3 years that were available. And when I say available, they were free. They didn't cost them any money. They didn't cost them any draft choices, and they didn't even have to draft them. They were available for them to sign for free. So, my first fax to those gentlemen, I believe Chris Palmer was the head coach, and but I sent it to him and the general manager at the time. A fax list of who they should take from each team. Those of you who are old enough to know this, every single team had to offer 5 players for the Cleveland Browns to choose from. Once they picked a player from that group, then they were allowed to pull back 1 or 2 players from the 5 that they offered. Well, here's who I told the Cleveland Browns to sign. And you tell me if you've ever heard of them. The very first person I said to sign was a guy named Kurt Warner. So Kurt Warner would have been the Cleveland Browns starting quarterback, or at least one of 3 quarterbacks they would have signed that day. As somebody who's available in free agency, who I said to sign, was a guy named Hines Ward. You might have heard of him. Another guy who's available, I think it was that year also, or the next year, this guy Priest Holmes. If you've been playing fantasy football for as long as I have, you've probably heard of him too, considering 4 of the 5 or 6 years he played in the NFL were all in the top 100 of fantasy football scoring seasons. Let me see. And then another, okay, so those 4 guys, 3 guys were available to the Cleveland Browns for free. Didn't cost them anything. And I sent it right there in a fax to them, signed these guys. Hines Ward was on the Pittsburgh Steelers. He went into free agency. They were in no hurry to sign him. It took them months before they re-signed him. And he didn't re-sign at a large contract. But he fit criteria that told me he was going to be a very good player. Didn't expect him to go to the Hall of Fame. Didn't expect Kurt Warner to go to the Hall of Fame. Didn't expect Priest Holmes to have a Hall of Fame career that was cut short. I didn't, but I knew they were going to be good, viable players. Now, in retrospect, it's probably a good thing that these players didn't get signed by the Cleveland Browns, because they probably all wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame right now. Probably true. But if you have good players, you have a better chance at having a successful season, and maybe your coach can grow. And again, who knows? The next year, year 2 or 3, I believe it's 2, that Cleveland had a chance to draft. Again, they were going to have the number 1 draft choice overall for that one, and I sent something else in saying, hey, here's what you guys should do. You should trade down in the draft. The best defensive player, because the top 2 players were defensive players. And I said, I believe the best defensive player in the draft can be had around number 5 to 7. They could be had. He could be had. He's available later on. He played in the Sun Belt Conference, but I'm telling you, everything I'm seeing, this is the guy to pick. So trade down, get some extra draft choices, and because your team sucks, you should be able, getting extra draft choices to get more players is always a good thing. The guy I recommended them to draft was Brian Urlacher, another Hall of Famer. So think about it. The Cleveland Browns could have had 3 Hall of Famers and somebody who would have been in the Hall of Fame if his body held up. But they didn't listen to me, and as a matter of fact, after that, and let me be honest, I did say, if you do stay at the number 1 draft choice overall, draft Courtney Brown, which they did do. So I got to admit that, I would have done the same thing they did if I didn't trade down. And yes, he had a lackluster career. Injuries also. The Cleveland Browns then, shortly thereafter, asked me to quit sending them faxes and also quit contacting them. They basically said, you don't know what you're doing, stop, kid, you don't know what you're doing. And obviously, they didn't know what they were doing, but I did pretty well. I'm very proud of my picks that would have helped the Cleveland Browns. And and I mentioned that I like to look at teams that are at the bottom and trying to bring them to the top. And that's why I've had such an association with the Cleveland Browns, because you guys have sucked for so long. You found ways to suck. Even when you get good players, you find ways to suck. When you have high draft choices, you find ways to actually screw them over. So many times that you've done that where you had all sorts of opportunity. 2 other times, because one of the things I'm really good at is picking out quarterbacks from the draft. One year, I think it's 2014, I know it is 2014, I said trade down. You have all these picks in the first round, trade down, gather a bunch of second round picks. And in the second round, draft 2 quarterbacks. Draft Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo. They'll both be available in the second round. Everything I'm hearing says they're going to be available in the second round. Sure enough, I was right. So the Cleveland Browns could have had Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think those of you who know fantasy football realize they're still around right now. One of them's the starting quarterback for the Raiders, and the other one is available in free agency or trade, who's making $24 million right now, and he's probably going to be available free agency. I don't think the 49ers are going to be able to trade him prior to them cutting them. They just don't want to swallow that $24 million pill, I don't believe. I've already mentioned in another video that sure enough, later on, 2018, I said trade down, get out of the number 1 draft choice, trade down several times, take Lamar Jackson. He's the quarterback I'd recommend. And of course, they ignored me for that too. So it's hard for me to feel sorry for the Cleveland Browns because I keep giving them excellent advice. I've actually talked to one of their general managers, a couple general managers ago, via LinkedIn, and I gave him some of my ideas. He followed one of them. I told him to trade this gentleman, get a second round draft choice and so on. He actually did that, whether he did it because of me or not. And that's the thing. I've talked to so many general managers that sometimes they do exactly what I tell them to do. But I can't say for sure it's because I told them, or if they weren't already thinking that, or if somebody else didn't give them the same advice. I have found out that Gil Brandt gave the same advice I did at one time, and that's why Drew Brees wound up on the New Orleans Saints. I told him to take LaDainian Tomlinson and take Drew Brees in the second round. He did it, but Gil Brandt had told him something very similar. So, yeah, I definitely told him Michael Vick was not the way to go as far as quarterback goes. I digress. These are my notes on the Cleveland Browns, by the way. So here you go. We're at the current problems of the Cleveland Browns. They decide to trade for Deshaun Watson. Now, fascinating. One of the dumbest things I've seen in a long time. What they did was they mortgaged their future for this person. And I want to point out that I'm talking about him as a football player only. Okay, let's look at him as a football player. When he was coming out of college, I looked at him as if I was drafting. I dropped him into the second round. I know he went in the first, but in my head, I had him as a second rounder, and here's why. I thought his talent was a first round talent, easy. But because of his size and the way he plays football, I thought there was going to be durability issues. All right? So understand this, Cleveland Brown fans. I thought there was going to be durability issues. Was one of the reasons why I would have dropped him into the second round. Sure enough, he comes into the league and he hits it like gangbusters. Is he phenomenal? Absolutely. He's crushing it. He's putting up numbers like a pinball machine. And then he gets injured and misses half the season. Then he comes back the next year. He's a little tentative, but he still puts up a solid season, a Pro Bowl type season. Then he comes in and he plays, and his third year, he does a great job, but he gets injured. Then after that, he comes in his fourth year, does a phenomenal job. So in 4 years, he's available for 2.5 of those years, ballparking. But But his 5th year, all the allegations came out. He sits. He hasn't played in a year. And the Cleveland Browns, in their brilliance, trade for him and give him a contract for 5 more years. Now, knowing what I know about NFL quarterbacks, as they get older, they do not become more durable. They normally become less durable. And he wasn't that durable to begin with. So now you've signed yourself to a guaranteed contract that there's no way they can break. And for the amount of money they signed it for, and he's not durable. And he's getting older. And he hasn't played in a year. And they've given up 3 draft choices, 3 first-round draft choices, 2 second-rounders, and a few other things. They messed up. And here's another reason why. They had an adequate quarterback. Was he phenomenal? No, he was not. Baker Mayfield is not a phenomenal quarterback. Is he a good quarterback? Yes. On a power running team, could he win? Yes. He showed that by taking you guys to the playoffs when he's healthy. Last year he wasn't healthy, and you guys kept dragging his broken body out there and having him play. And he wasn't healthy. And then you're going, oh, he sucked. The man didn't suck. He fought through pain and stuff to actually go out there and play for his teammates. And you guys just didn't care. You just wanted to see better performance out of a man who was beaten to a pulp. The problem with Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham is a phenomenal wide receiver. And it's not just because of his skill set. Odell Beckham is very smart. He reads the rule book. He understands the rules. He runs great routes. He knows things that other wide receivers would benefit greatly if they knew half as much as he does. Odell Beckham is a brilliant wide receiver. Odell Beckham wasn't getting the balls tossed to him that he should have been. That's true. Baker Mayfield, I don't know how he missed him or why. I do know that Baker Mayfield did not dislike Odell Beckham, nor did I think Odell Beckham disliked Baker Mayfield. I will tell you there was a disconnect on the field. I understand Odell Beckham's dad, buried Baker on social media. I can understand why. So I understand all that mess. I don't understand why Baker Mayfield didn't get the ball to Odell more often. I don't. But my belief is, and this is my belief, Odell Beckham would normally get the best cornerback and the most coverage whenever they played a team. Baker Mayfield's mindset is don't throw interceptions. So if you've got somebody who's actually blanketed in coverage or has a lot of people around him, you're going to throw to the safer guys. You're going to throw to the guys who got single coverage or soft coverage or soft zone coverage, and not the guy that's attracting all the attention. Odell Beckham attracted a lot of attention. Baker Mayfield didn't want to throw interceptions. That's a theory. I don't know if I'm right, but what I do know about Baker Mayfield is he doesn't like to throw interceptions, and he likes to throw tight, accurate balls. The deeper Odell went, also, the less likely that Baker was going to launch a ball towards him also. Also, Odell Beckham's success came not as the primary wide receiver. He was either the second or third receiving option on the Rams. So if you point to his success on the Rams, it's not the same as the Browns. One, he was the number 1 wide receiver. The other one, he was number 2 or 3. So that does free up opportunities. He wasn't getting the best cornerback anymore. He was getting the second best or the third best. So that frees up opportunity he would not have had otherwise. So there's a lot of arguments here. I keep hearing talking heads. I don't really listen to talk radio about football. And the reason why is they don't understand it as well as I do. Why should I call up a talk radio host and talk to somebody who doesn't know as much as I do? I have no reason to do that. Now, but on those few occasions that I hear him, I never hear him bring up any of the points that I point out. They just don't seem to grasp it. So, I'm looking at the Cleveland Browns. And the Cleveland Browns How are they going to do this year in their division? They're going to come in last. And they're coming last because Jacoby Brissett used to be an adequate backup quarterback. If you look at his analytics, they look great. But this is the reason why analytics are kind of shit. Analytics are statistics. And there's, I think Samuel Clemens said it best, or Mark Twain, whoever you want to refer to him as. He goes, there are lies, there are damn lies, and then there's statistics. And let me tell you, if you're on a football team based solely on statistics, you're going to have a losing football team. You got to be able to process the information and also see what a football player is. Jacoby Brissett is an excellent football player. He's very talented, who unfortunately almost every coach in the NFL has a book on him that knows exactly what he's going to do. Jacoby Brissett is an excellent athlete who's going to get intercepted a lot. Now, the only way he's going to have success is if he gets the ball to Kareem Hunt or Nick Chubb, and the defense can stop the pass and also get to the quarterback. So Cleveland Browns got a lot of talent on the defense. They do have a phenomenal 1-2 punch in running back. If Jacoby Brissett can find a way not to throw interceptions, Cleveland Browns have a chance at having a good season. When Deshaun Watson comes back eventually, this year or next, he's got to shake off rust from 2 years, or a year and a half, 2 years. He's not going to do it immediately. You're not going to see the best of Deshaun Watson this year. It's not going to happen no matter what. Matter of fact, I wouldn't be shocked if he lost most of his games when he does come back. So temper your expectations. That's not Deshaun Watson's fault. That's the fault of the fact that he doesn't have playing time. And it's hard to come in and just immediately step in and do great. Is he a talent? Yes, he is. Is he fragile? Yes, he is. Has he been off a long time? Yes, he has. Now, what would I have done? Here's what I would have done. And this is where, you're going to argue all you want, but again, the season will play out. Mitch Trubisky is a much better quarterback than people gave him credit for. He did take the Bears to the playoffs. He did it because his head coach gave up his offensive play calling duties and had somebody else do it. And that's when Mitch Trubisky started to thrive. Mitch Trubisky was not able to actually show all of his talent. He wasn't able to grow into the quarterback I thought he could be. He's actually from the Cleveland Browns area. He's from Mentor, Ohio. And he's an athletic quarterback. What I would have done if I was in the Cleveland Browns position, I would have said, yeah, Baker Mayfield is adequate. He's good. When he's not injured, he's pretty good. And not phenomenal, but pretty good. And the way quarterback salaries are right now, let's pick up his 5th year. Let's sign Mitch Trubisky for a 2 to 3 year contract. 2, probably could get. 3, I'd push for that. And here's why. I believe in Mitchell Trubisky. I believe with good head coaching, and a good staff around him, I think he could be a successful quarterback. Do I know? No. Would I, as a betting man, would I put money on him being successful? Yes, I would. I'd be comfortable putting money on Mitch Trubisky to actually grow as a quarterback over the course of time. I do believe he's going to wind up being the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they made a mistake investing in Kenny Pitt, just because I don't believe they should have drafted him because they had Mitchell. But I understand why. There is logic to him, and that's why Pittsburgh is a very good team that winds up going to the Super Bowls and winning them. Unlike the Cleveland Browns. They have a plan. It was a good, solid plan. Now they got 3 quarterbacks that are better than adequate. And they may wind up being even better than that. We'll see. But I would have signed Mitchell Trubisky and Baker Mayfield. I would have been happy at that duo and have them duke it out and to see which one was the better quarterback that year and be comfortable with that, and then make a decision a year later when there's much better quarterbacks coming out I also, if I was going to draft a quarterback, I would have drafted Desmond Ryder in the third round. Phenomenal value. I would have gone that route too. So I would have signed Mitchell Trubisky. I would have kept my draft choice. I would have extended Baker Mayfield one more year, give him an opportunity to compete against Mitchell, as a healthy quarterback, and I would have drafted Desmond Ryder. Now, and then in my first round draft choice that the Browns would have retained and not give it away, I would have done one of two things. I would have drafted the best wide receiver available if they were depending, or I would have traded down to the second round or so on, and gathered more draft picks. I don't believe the Cleveland Browns are going to be successful this year. I think they're going to have an uphill battle being successful next year. One of the reasons why they're going to have a problem this year is every team in their division has gotten better. Every one of them. And the Cleveland Browns haven't. They've either stayed the same or gotten worse. So I have the Cleveland Browns fourth in the division. And I wouldn't be shocked that heads start to roll within the next year or two of this new Deshaun Watson era. Sorry, Cleveland fans. That's just my belief.